Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. Now, this is a pre-recorded session this week, so if you do have any questions and you're joining us on Zoom, just reply to the confirmation email that you got from Zoom, and I'll be able to reply to those. If you're watching us on YouTube, just leave a comment underneath, and I'll try to get back to those when I get back. And on Facebook, same thing, leave a comment underneath the video, and I'll get to those when I'm able. My name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's National Diagnostic Technical Trainers. Been in the training department the last 9 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple of years as a diagnostic sales rep at Snap-on. So I had about 30 different Snap-on franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced, in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before I did that, it was 8 years at Subaru. So worked at a dealership, and over time, I guess, became the default diag guy in the shop. So over time, just ended up with all the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bay. Then before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is charging and starting systems. And it took a long time to get here because really charging and starting, more of the charging system than anything, is the basis for what all of these sensors and switches and things that we've been talking about over the past however many years. That's really the basis of what they run on. So if I have a problem in my charging system, my battery, my alternator has a problem, then I can have all sorts of other problems with the vehicle. If I have low voltage, high voltage, shorts, any of those problems, diode ripple, noise, if I have any of those problems, I will have other issues in the vehicle that can stem from that I might not. It's always a good idea to check the charging and battery first before we go too far into a diagnostic, especially if it could be an electrical problem. So we always want to make sure we're testing the system, checking them out. So we'll start with the battery though. And the battery, as you may be well aware, it stores electricity inside a chemical and metal bath. It's mainly used to start the vehicle, and then once the vehicle is running, it supplies the power to the accessories, and then the alternator, of course, is used to keep it topped up and charged. The three main types you're going to see, there are a few other stragglers out there, but they're not as common. It's going to be your lead-acid battery. That's been the same for many, many years. We have AGMs, which are absorbent glass mat, and then we have the lithium iron phosphate batteries, the LiFePO4 batteries there, which they're using in more cars than I thought before I started doing the research here. So we'll talk more about those in a second. First one, though, is the most common. It's the lead acid battery. So they use the lead plates in a bath of sulfuric acid. So we have a lead plate on one side, the negative electrode, and then we have lead dioxide on the other electrode. And then they're sitting in a bath of sulfuric acid. Now, the difference in the lead compounds allows ions to transfer between the negative and the positive plates. Each cell, so each pair here of these plates, should generate about 2.2 volts. We run them together inside the battery with the plates, and then it gives us a little over 12 volts when we have a good battery. So fully charged 12.2 should be about 13.6 with a 6-cell battery. AGM batteries are also used in many vehicles nowadays, and they are very similar to a lead acid. They have the lead, they are the dissimilar metals, the plates, and then they also have this absorbent glass mat between the plates. And what that does is it absorbs that sulfuric acid, that electrolyte that they're using in there, and that helps if it spills, if it tips over, it's going to avoid those spills, and we don't have to worry so much about venting as well. So it could be a single point vent instead of multiple vents on top of the battery. So like I said, same basic premise as a lead acid battery. It's just the acid isn't sloshing around inside. And then we get to the more of the new kid on the block. So lithium ion phosphate batteries. So those use lithium ion technology, and they commonly run at about 48 volts. There's a couple manufacturers that decided 42 volts was fine. But most of the vehicles that you're going to see out there now are going to be at 48 volts DC. So they have upgraded charging systems, and these batteries, they also have a standard 12-volt battery in the majority of those vehicles as well. These 48-volt batteries are used in what we call mild hybrid vehicles. So there's actually a few more of those out there than I thought there were. Mild hybrid vehicles give a small assist to the engine, and it helps increase the miles per gallon. So smoother takeoffs, really just giving it an extra torque assist. So for example, on Dodge, you got Ram 1500s and some Jeeps use this with the Hemi and with the 3.6, the Pentastar, on newer models, and they call it e-torque assist. So it's an e-torque assist. So mild hybrid vehicles use this hybrid style generator to charge at 48 volts. So it's very much closer to a hybrid vehicle than it is a normal gasoline engine. And it also has a DC to DC converter in there that converts the 48 volt DC down to the 12 volt to start the car. Or actually, a lot of times they don't even use it to start the car anymore. They'll use the generator to spin the motor over as well, just like they would in an electric or a hybrid vehicle. But the 48 volt system is designed to support heavier loads like air conditioners, engine fans, things of that nature, enable faster heating of the cabin and a catalytic converter. So we got the 48 volt lithium ion battery we talked about, AC to DC converter, hybrid control software inside the control module. And then the 48 volt battery can supply more power to the hybrid motor. And some of them even use like a little electric superchargers in there as well to give them a little extra boost. And then the 12 volt system is a quarter of the power from the 48 volt system, of course. Enables an intelligent driving experience, improving efficiency and providing power for more accessories such as active safety and connected infotainment systems. So we need a lot of voltage going on inside, because I know years and years ago, the manufacturers were all talking about, oh, we need to increase the voltage. We need to go 48 volts or 42 volts, or techs were talking about it's like, oh man, they're going to change the whole system of the vehicle, and where they ended up, not really 100% change the whole system, because we do still have 12 volt accessories and a 12 volt system, but we also have the 48 volt system running in conjunction with that 12 volt system as well. So let's look at a little example here. We got a 2021 Volvo XC60, which would have something like that in there. And if we go into service resets and relearns, which is our quick menu for all the resets and relearns on the vehicle, we see the first one there under maintenance, replace or relearn the battery. So let's go and see what that's all about. We have a battery replacement 0 reset. So when we replace the battery, we need to reset the system to 0 so it knows that the battery is not aged. Because as the battery ages, it adjusts the charging level. Some information about the vehicle's power supply can be found in both the central electronic module and the battery monitoring sensor. With this service, the stored power supply information is reset. Resetting to 0 should only be performed when replacing the battery. Ignition on, engine off. In order for the battery monitoring sensor to calculate the battery's correct charge level, the vehicle must be off for at least 4 hours after the reset as well. In some instances, it may require the car to be off for 6 hours. This is on the condition that the ignition key has been removed, all doors and lids closed, and vehicles locked. If the charge level is low, the brake energy regeneration feature and start-stop feature will not be permitted, and the battery would require charging at that point. So there's a little reset you can do. You hit continue, it counts down, it resets it back to factory level, and then it's able to relearn itself. Also wanted to check out, let's see how much that battery is. So the high voltage battery is 48 volts, mind you, 48 volts. Not nearly as big as a hybrid battery, not nearly as big as an EV battery. It's still 5,800 pounds. So those can get a little pricey. And like I said, Dodge and Jeep are using stuff like that. BMW is using a system like that. So there's a fair amount of manufacturers out there that are using that type of system. There's also, they expect it by 2025 to at least 10% of the market will be at least these mild hybrid vehicles using that higher voltage battery. So just so you're aware. To tie into that, we have the battery management system. Now, some manufacturers use it just for like that mild hybrid system. Some manufacturers use it on their 12 volt system as well. So a battery management system uses sensors, controllers, and software to monitor the battery's state of charge. It allows the vehicle to charge the battery depending on load and state of health. And when the battery is replaced, the system also needs to be reset, usually with a scan tool. Sometimes I'm sure you can do it through the dash, a couple button presses, but it does need to be reset. What some of these systems will do, like the Ford one we're going to see here in a little bit, on the Ford vehicles, if you're leaving the ignition on for any amount of time. Say you're sitting in your driveway, you're cleaning the vehicle, maybe it's not running, but you wanted to listen to the radio, and the radio's on. Then all of a sudden the vehicle starts shutting down systems, and you're like, well, what's going on? So it monitors the battery. When state of charge gets too low, it starts turning off accessories in order to save that battery power that's remaining left, so that we can actually start the car when we're done. So it does need to be reset, usually with a scan tool, especially on the Ford. We'll show that here in a second. And that brings me to alternators. So alternators generate electricity using magnetic fields. So we have the field windings in there, and they spin inside these magnets, and it creates electromagnetic fields, which in turn creates current and voltage. So the magnetic fields in this case, though, generate an alternating current. So we know vehicles don't run on AC, they run on DC. So we need to convert it to a DC voltage that the car can use, and that is done using the rectifier bridge. It's usually in the tail end of the alternator assembly. That way we'll get a DC voltage output, and that is then used to charge the battery, run other accessories off the battery, and things like that. So here's our exploded view of an alternator. Pretty standard alternator, just like most of the ones you'll see on the market now. So we got our pulley there, and there's a couple little differences with pulleys nowadays we'll get to in a second. At the front part of the housing, we got the rotor, which the rotor rotates. That's a good way to remember that. So the rotor rotates, it's got the windings in there. And then we also have stator, actually, stator, which stays stationary, and that's got the electrical connectors there. We have the rear bracket, brush holder, so the brushes actually are what give voltage down the coil here. And then we also have the outer coil there, and it sets off the voltage, the AC voltage out. It's got this the stator, the three separate sets of windings in the stator. So first it goes out and it goes to the rectifier, and the rectifier uses 3 sets of, or it could be 3 or 6 sets, positive diodes and negative diodes. So when the winding set is sending out a negative signal, we'll see that it goes to ground. So it goes through that and it goes to ground. When it's setting out a positive signal, it'll go out the positive side, and that outputs to the battery. And then when we flip over, you'll see this one on the bottom is positive, right? So it flows out, and then it flips. When it flips negative polarity, it goes back to ground, and it goes through the diode and then back to ground there. So unrectified, before it gets here, we have the positive, the negative, the positive, the negative, the positive, the negative. So it goes up and down either side as alternating current does. So we have positive current, negative current. When it's rectified, we only get the top part. So we only get that top half. It cuts off the bottom because the bottom flows back, and then the positive side flows into the battery. So then we get a little bit of ups and downs. So that's why if you've ever done a alternator ripple test on an alternator, you'll be able to see it going up and down a little bit. It doesn't go up a lot, it goes up and down a little bit. But you should be able to see a little wave up and down. That's doing what it should. It's cutting off the top halves of the waveform. And then the other part of it we have is the voltage regulator. So the voltage regulator monitors the voltage coming out of the alternator and then changes the amount of current flow into the field terminal coming in there. So that's what charges up the field coils on the rotor there. So it goes through the slip rings and the brushes, and then into the field coils, and that allows it to generate more electricity if it needs or less. So a common test to do is called an alternator ripple test that I just mentioned before. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can run it negative to negative, positive to the back of the alternator, negative to the positive terminal on the battery, positive to the channel 1 to the positive on the alternator. And then it's going to give you these waveforms. So you see we got the up and down, just like I said. If we have a problem with shorted or open diodes, you'll see another type of pattern where you got a good pattern and then a bad pattern. A good pattern, a bad pattern, might even go negative. So if I have any problems in that stage, that will cause an issue with everything under the hood. The electricity power delivery will give us problems with that. We'll get noise, we'll get anomalies, we'll get weird, low voltage problems, high voltage problems. So you just always want to make sure you check it early, especially if you suspect it's an electrical gremlin. Check the battery for proper state of charge, proper health. Double check the alternator, make sure the output's correct, and make sure that the waveform looks good. There are also variable voltage alternators out there now. So they run at a lower voltage while driving, just when they're not really needed. And then the voltage increases when the driver goes to coast. So when we're coasting, it shoots up a spike of up to 17 volts back into the battery, so it allows it to charge the battery quicker. So these are computer controlled. So normally it's going to operate at 12.5 to 3.5 volts DC most times. And then when it sends out that higher voltage signal, you can see 17 volts. Per Dodges do that. Lots of manufacturers, I'm sure, do this at this point. But some, talking to people, they're like, oh yeah, 16.5, 17 volts on a Chrysler product's not out of the ordinary now. So it's not just your 14.4 volts that you're used to, or 13 something volts. You could see up to 17 volts on some of these vehicles. So here's an example of a computer controlled alternator. So this is on a Subaru. It's computer controlled alternator. So this white and black wire is the power output. And then this input right here is LIN bus. So it actually gets its instructions over the network from the ECM. The ECM hooks to the alternator, increases or decreases the amount of energy that it's outputting just from over this LIN bus. Also, the battery sensor, which is on the negative battery cable, sends out a LIN bus signal too. So they're both on the same bus. So if you have a problem with one of these alternators, it could very well be the module internal, could be the ECM, or it could be a problem on the LIN bus. You can actually diagnose the LIN bus and check the pattern and make sure it's okay. We also have clutched alternator pulleys now. So we have computer controlled alternators. We also have clutched alternator pulleys, which what it does is it allows the pulley to freewheel when the engine's in coast. So if I lift off the gas and we have less torque coming off the crank, then it allows it to kind of just sit there and freewheel. It's kind of like a bicycle pedal. So when you're pedaling forward, it moves, and then when you stop moving, it just kind of freewheels and coasts that way. So it's a one-way clutch. It allows for less load on the engine and the other pulleys at times. So that'll save a little bit of MPG there as well. That brings us to starters. So the last portion of our trio of battery alternators. So starters are an electric motor used to crank the engine. So when the ignition's in the start position, it causes battery current to flow to the starter by using the starter solenoid. So depending on how the vehicle's set up, it could have an external starter solenoid. It could have a starter solenoid integral to the starter itself. And the ignition switch, when it's turned to start, grounds that solenoid and then allows it to make contact and allows the current to flow. Current flow, of course, causes the motor to spin, engaging the ring gear on the engine. And then that turns the ring gear of the flywheel or the flex plate. And then once the engine is running, starter's going to stop. The drive gear disengages, so we don't have it overrunning itself. And it's just a high torque electric motor used to get that vehicle started. Because once the vehicle's or the engine's in motion, going through its 4 cycles, it only has to go through a couple cycles before it self-sustains, and it allows itself to just keep running by itself without the starter. So there's a common starter with the integrated solenoid on the top. So we have commutators and brushes in the back, and that's where the electricity comes in through there and allows it and generates the motor to spin. Now in this case, we got our pinion gear here, which gets actuated out. So when my solenoid closes, it pulls in this arm. So it's got a return spring that holds it out normally. So it's going to pull this arm in due to the solenoid making contact. So it pulls the contacts back, makes contact, makes a circuit there, which in turn pivots on this arm and pushes it out and allows it to spin in there. So it pushes it out, engages the flywheel. When it's done, the starter signal stops. So the solenoid opens up, which the return spring pulls it back, pulls it away. And then there we go. So if we have a bad return spring in there or the solenoid gets stuck, then that could be a cause of, well, the starter is going to stay engaged. That happens. Some new starters, it's has a helical in here, which allows it to not get stuck engaged. So as soon as it spins out, it's going to spin back once the engine spins it too fast. So that's kind of like a safety issue. And that also brings us to auto start and stop. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge fan of this. I turn it off anytime I'm in a car with it, but I understand what they're thinking. You know, lower emissions at idle. We don't want to be idling for too long. We're going to auto stop. But due to that, gives us more complexity. And the way I think about it is, if we're starting and stopping 10, 15, 20 times a day, I don't care how heavy duty that starter is, you're probably going to need to replace it a lot earlier than a standard starter. Uh, I really just think you're going to have a lot more component replacements. I could be wrong, but it just seems like if I'm starting and stopping the car multiple times a day, especially if I'm driving around town, stoplights and things like that, could just cause more wear and tear. I guess that'll remain to be seen. To counteract this, due to the fact that the engine's shutting off and I need to restart it, oftentimes they'll use a dry lubricant coating on the main bearing so we don't have to have oil pressure when it spools up. Also use an auxiliary electric water pump to keep the heat moving and keep the coolant moving around. And then they'll also use AGM or gel batteries, which is similar to the AGM, except it uses a gel instead of the glass mat, to keep it going, keep it, because they're able to do multiple deep cycles. It's a deep cycle battery on a marine battery. Same type of principle there. They're able to do more deep cycles because if you're starting it, you're draining that battery a lot faster than a normal battery would be used to. Let's go live on the tool. Talk about a few things that we can do there. All right, here's my scan tool up. And the first vehicle I'm going to pick is going to be the Ford. So I got a 2018 Ford F-150 here. And we're going to go in, check a few things. So first thing, we'll look in shop key and see what we can see on the charging system here. Look in the wiring diagram. The alternator here. Wiring diagrams. Starting and charging. So we have the alternator here. So the alternator here, and we have our 3 lines coming in, 1 line going out. We also have a generator current sensor. So this is the current sensor that uses with the battery management system to judge how quickly the battery is draining. So that's on the negative battery terminal right there. So that'll send a signal. And then there's the battery right there. So with the battery monitoring sensor, it could be as well, or the generator current sensor as well. So it could kind of work either way. Either way, it monitors the battery. So if we take a look in the scanner, though, with that battery monitoring system, what happens on these is you can get a situation where you're sitting in the driveway for an hour or two, and then it starts shutting things off. Well, what happens is you have to wait 8 hours before it's able to reset the system again. So there is a way with a scan tool to go in there and reset that system so you don't have to wait that 8 hours. Because maybe you might need to do some sort of a diagnostic on one of the systems that shut off, or maybe the customer's just freaking out. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't turn my radio back on, or something like that. So this is inside the BCM. This is on a lot of Fords, newer Fords. They have this system. And it's a functional test inside the BCM. And it is a special function. And you can see we have the battery monitoring system reset right there. So we can go in, cycle the key. This function resets the battery monitoring system. We need to do this following if the battery is replaced as well. So you have to do it even if you just replace the battery. If the body control module is replaced, or if we're instructed to by the workshop manual, which would often be, hey, I'm locked out of functions on it. Continue, it goes through, and then in this case, in the simulator, it gives me an error because the engine's running, and you can't have the engine running. But what it's going to do is going to go through, and it's going to just be a reset button that we can reset, and then it just resets the system back to normal. All good. Okay, so that's the Ford battery monitoring system. Let's look at this RAM. So this RAM has an interesting alternator system because it's one of those mild hybrid vehicles. So if we go in here, mild hybrid vehicles, gas electric, and wiring diagrams. So if we look at the charging circuit with the e-torque, as we said, that's that assist system. And a little bit closer. And we see it's called a generator unit motor module. So it's actually integral to the alternator. It's a special alternator, runs at 48. Oh, it's a generator, actually. So we call it an alternator. It's a generator that runs at 48 volts to be able to charge the system. So we have a battery pack control module here. You can see it's 48 volt positive coming off right there. We also have crankshaft pulse coming in, CAN bus, private CAN bus, ignition, crank signal negative, more CAN bus. So lots of CAN bus. We have an intelligent battery sensor, which is on the battery itself. That measures state of charge, state of health. And then we have the battery here. So we can see it gets a little bit more complicated when we add in these mild hybrid vehicle type systems. So that's how Dodge, our Ram does it. Dodge does it on the Ram. I wanted to look up this alternator too, though. How much is this alternator? $1,300 because it is a generator. Right, 2 hours too, includes testing. And there are some TSBs on this as well. We go in a charging system. There's a safety recall and the 48 volt ground cable fastener. There's also a flash for the control processor and a flash for the battery pack control module. So a few different TSBs. We got recalls and flashes on those as well. So just be aware. Like I said, that's going to be a decent amount of the market coming here soon in a few years. Last one's going to be this Volvo. So this Volvo is going to be a little bit different as well. So this is also a mild hybrid. So look in the alternator. Wiring diagrams. Performance, no, we don't want that one. Starting and charging systems. So on this, you see it has an alternator control module, which is labeled like an alternator. And we have 2 batteries. So this one has a 48 volt battery and a 12 volt battery on the vehicle as well. So there's my alternator. There's my fuse, goes to the power distribution system, goes into the big battery and the alternate battery as well. So it's got 2 batteries, 48 volt, 12 volt, and some conversion circuitry. Now, as far as scan tool stuff, come in here. And, let's say we want to go in here and we want to replace that battery. So that gives us our functional resets. We have a battery monitoring sensor, battery replacement 0 reset. So we want to replace the battery. And the central electronic module, we need to do it there too. So in 2 different places, we need to do a 0 reset, and the service resets and relearns brings them both onto the screen right where you need them, when you need them. So that's pretty helpful. One other thing in guided component test too. So we go into guided component test and we go into our classes because we got our list of training classes in here. We go into how to. There's going to be a couple different things that we can look at, but the main thing I would like to talk about in here is going to be under test tips. So we go into test tips. The very first tip is going to be that alternator ripple test. So that's a nice, easy test that you can do and check and see if you have some diode ripple, some weird stuff going on inside the vehicle. So to view alternator ripple with this tool, coupling AC is used, subtracts the average of value of a waveform, and amplifies small variations in the waveform by blocking the DC portion of an input signal. The idea for viewing alternator ripple, because alternator ripple should have only DC, no AC. So if I have AC, then that's a problem. So it's going to go through, and like we said, we can connect it a couple different ways in there, and you can do your test and see whether or not you have a bad alternator. There are also guided component tests on specific vehicles, specific functions in there. I think like the Ford has some good ones. Actually, let me reactivate that Ford on a guided component test. So in this case, we got a charging system. We can do some tests on the battery monitoring sensor, charging system tests, and a generator current sensor. So it's got a current sensor off the generator, battery monitoring on the battery, and then charging system. We also have alternator ground test, DC voltage test, voltage drop test, a multitude of different tests we can do on the charging system on many vehicles inside the guided component test as well. All right, so that is my time for this week. Let's talk about a contest. That is not the slide I wanted. So let's talk about a little contest. You, if you are a Snap-on Scan Tool owner, have an epic chance to win an epic prize, as we would say. So anyone that owns a Snap-on Scan Tool that's able to upgrade to 22.4, some of the older tools can't take the update, but those of you that can, anyone that upgrades to 22.4, which is the current software bundle that we're on right now, came out in October, will be entered into a prize to win a Zeus Epic Diagnostic Workstation. This is a Zeus Plus Epic Workstation. Retail value over $24,000. Has this unique custom wrap on the outside, which looks kind of futuristic and electronic. It is also going to be labeled with your name if you win. So you get a customized wrap on there. We're giving away 10 of these in North America. So between the US and Canada, we have 10 regions. So you'll have one winner per region. And like I said, it's super easy to enter. All you have to do is make sure you're running 22.4 by the end of business on December 31st, 2022. We'll do the draw a little bit after that. See who was running 22.4 at the end of the year. And if your name gets picked, then you win. We'll deliver it to you. So it is a 36-inch Epic with a riser. And inside that riser is a fully loaded Zeus Plus with a docking station and a 27-inch touchscreen on the back on the slots and dots. So it is a full-featured, high-end diagnostic workstation. It's definitely, like I said, pretty easy. If you're on software subscription already, just update your tool. It should come to the tool automatically, or you can update it over the internet using ShopStream Connect. If you have a data plan that is not expired, you can just install the update and you're all set, good to go. Otherwise, you can just, if you did a buy one, get one free update and you're owed a free one, well, install that free one. You can do that over the internet as well. So any of those situations, or you can just talk to your local Snap-on rep, and I'm sure they can help you out as well. So that's a pretty cool prize. I really wish I could win it, but I can't. So definitely make sure you get updated by the end of the year. So next week for the end of the year, we're doing something a little bit different than what we normally do. So we're going to do an Ask Jason Anything. So I don't know if you're familiar with the website Reddit. They do this thing called an AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. So it's going to be a little less structured than we usually do, but we will have some categories of questions we want to talk about. First off, it's going to be, well, what do you as the viewer, what do you want to see next year? What do you want to learn more about next year? So we'll take some ideas and poll you guys and see what floats to the top. And then we'll do a category of maybe, how do I do this function, whatever it happens to be, on my Snap-on tool? And then maybe some generalized diagnostic questions in there as well. So like I said, a little less structured, but I think it'll be a little interesting, a little more fun, towards the end of the year, and get some ideas from you folks too, which is what I want. So 6 and 9 Eastern, same time, same place. If you want to join on Zoom, go to snapon.com/OT, sign up there. Otherwise, the 6 p.m. class goes to YouTube, so youtube.com/Snap-on Diagnostics. And then the 9 p.m. Eastern goes to my Facebook page. So it's facebook.com snap-on-jason, all one word, no dash in the snap-on. So hopefully we'll see you then. If you want to watch any of our previous topics in this series of the live stream, so we're up to 52. This is topic number 52 right now. So we have 52 episodes in there. Anything from VVT, ADOS, data bus testing, no code. What do I do when there's no code? What's my diagnostic strategy there? Any of those, we can go and you can check them out. They're all free on YouTube. So youtube.com/snap-on-diagnostics. Once again, there is a playlist for live training. So you can go check that out at your leisure. Like we said, it's free. Now it comes up to Q&A. Now, just a reminder, this is a pre-recorded session today, so I can't answer questions live, but if you're watching on Zoom, reply to the confirmation email you got, or that, because that'll go to my email box, or you can, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're watching on Facebook, leave a comment under the video, and I'll get to those when I return. Also want to make sure I mention my buddy Al. So he does free training as well on different scan tools. So Mondays on Apollo, Wednesdays on Zeus, and Thursdays on Triton. If you want to sign up for that free training, same time, same place, 5 and 8 p.m. Central Time, 6 and 9 Eastern. If you go to snapon.com/OT on the right-hand side of the page, you can sign up for one of his classes. Very thorough. The first hour is going to be, let's get your Wi-Fi set up. Let's get your basic settings set up. Let's get you set up on a free Snap-on Cloud account so you can share files with your customers and each other. And then I was going to walk you through code to completion on a real world scenario on Fast Track Intelligent Diagnostics. You can see, how does it work? How do I work through it? And then on Wednesday and Thursday, since they have a scope and meter in those tools, I'll take about a 5-minute break and then go through the scope and meter on those tools as well for another hour. So definitely worth your time if you want a little refresher on it, or if you're new to the tool, definitely worth it. Al's been with us for a very long time, and it's definitely worth your time to spend with him. And that brings me to the end. So I'd like to thank you for spending a little bit of time, taking a little bit of time out of your busy day, come spend a little bit of time with us. Hopefully we learned a few more tips and tricks that we can use in the shop at a later date. So with that, enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy the rest of your week. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Have a good night and take care.